My parents said my boyfriend wasn't manly enough and ordered me to dump him. I should have known something was wrong when my dad suddenly started asking about my boyfriend's 5-year plan every time we visited. But it was the look, that microscopic glance between my parents when Ryan mentioned his freelance photography business, that finally made me realize I'd been living in a war zone disguised as Sunday dinner. Photography is such a flexible career, Mom said, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that makes your teeth ache. She passed the mashed potatoes to Ryan with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. So many different directions you could go with that. Ryan, bless him, just nodded and took another bite of pot roast. He'd been putting up with these passive-aggressive family dinners for 8 months now, ever since I'd started bringing him around. 8 months of my parents treating him like a temporary fixture they were politely tolerating until I came to my senses. Actually, I just booked a wedding next month that could lead to some really great connections, Ryan said, trying to inject enthusiasm into his voice. The bride's family owns a chain of hotels, and they mentioned needing promotional photography. Dad's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Hotels, huh? That sounds promising. Steady income is important when you're thinking about the future. His eyes flicked to me meaningfully, especially when you're considering bigger commitments. My stomach clenched. Here we go again. Ryan's building his portfolio right now. I jumped in, my voice a little too bright. It takes time to establish yourself as an artist. Of course it does, Mom agreed, but there was something sharp lurking beneath her understanding tone. It's just that Olivia has always been so practical. Remember when she wanted to be a veterinarian? We helped her see how competitive that field was, how much debt she'd accumulate. Now look at her, she's got that lovely position at the marketing firm, steady benefits, real security. My cheeks burned. They'd done more than help me see anything about veterinary school. They'd presented me with spreadsheets showing debt-to-income ratios and statistics about vet school acceptance rates until I'd convinced myself I was being unrealistic. I'd been 22 and trusted them completely. Photography isn't exactly a hobby, Mrs. Brennan, Ryan said quietly. I'm building a business. Oh, I didn't mean to suggest it was a hobby, Mom backtracked smoothly. I just think it's wonderful that you're pursuing your passion. It's very romantic. The word romantic hung in the air like a judgment. Impractical, childish, unsustainable. My younger brother Caleb, who'd been quietly demolishing his dinner roll, suddenly looked up. Why do you always talk different about Ryan when he's not here? The table went dead silent. Mom's smile faltered for just a second before snapping back into place. What do you mean, sweetheart? Like, yesterday you were telling Dad that Ryan probably doesn't even pay taxes properly, and that Olivia needs to think about whether— Caleb, Dad's voice cut through the air like a blade. Why don't you go wash up? I think you've got gravy on your face. But Caleb wasn't budging. At 14, he'd developed that teenager superpower of being completely oblivious to social cues when he had something to say. And last week you said his family probably doesn't have any money saved for emergencies, and that Olivia should consider what kind of life she wants. That's enough, Mom said firmly. You're misunderstanding grown-up conversations. My blood turned to ice water. What conversations? It's nothing, honey, Mom started, but I was already looking at Ryan, whose face had gone carefully blank in the way it did when he was trying not to show he was hurt. What conversations? I repeated, my voice getting sharper. Dad cleared his throat. We're just concerned parents, Olivia. We want to make sure you're thinking clearly about your future. That's what parents do. By talking about my boyfriend behind his back? We weren't talking about him, Mom protested. We were talking about you, about what you deserve. The words hit me like a slap. What I deserved. As if Ryan was somehow beneath what I deserved. I think I should go, Ryan said quietly, already pushing back from the table. Ryan, no, I started. It's fine, he said, but his jaw was tight. I'll call you later. He left without another word, and I sat there staring at my parents across the dining room table that suddenly felt like a battlefield. The pot roast tasted like cardboard in my mouth. You're upset, Mom observed as if this was a surprising development. Of course I'm upset. You've been sabotaging my relationship. We have not, Dad said, his voice taking on that reasonable tone that made me feel crazy for being angry. We've been honest about our concerns. There's a difference. Concerns you apparently only share when Ryan isn't here to defend himself. We didn't want to hurt his feelings, Mom said, like this made everything better. But Olivia, you have to understand. We've seen you throw yourself into relationships before. We watched you change your whole college major for that boy freshman year, remember? We're just trying to protect you from making another impulsive decision. My hands were trembling, and I gripped them together under the table. This isn't freshman year. I'm 26 years old. And we love you, Mom said, reaching across the table like she was going to take my hand. I pulled away. We just want you to be realistic about what kind of future you can build with someone who doesn't have stable prospects. There it was. The truth, finally dressed up in concern instead of buried in passive-aggressive dinner conversation. Caleb had been watching this whole exchange with wide eyes, and now he piped up again. But Ryan seems really nice. He helped me with my history project, and he didn't even act like it was boring. He is nice, I said, looking directly at my parents. He's kind and supportive, and he makes me laugh, and he works harder than anyone I know. We're not saying he's not a good person, Dad said carefully. We're just saying that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need compatibility in other areas. Values, goals, financial stability. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. You don't know anything about our values or our goals because you've never bothered to actually get to know him. You decided who he was the first time I brought him home, and you've been trying to convince me I was wrong about him ever since. Olivia, I'm going home, I said, grabbing my purse from the counter, and I need some time to think about this. As I walked to my car, I could hear them still talking inside, their voices low and urgent. Damage control. That's what this was now, figuring out how to manage the mess they'd created by letting their true feelings slip out. But as I drove home, the thing that kept playing in my head wasn't my parents' voices. It was Caleb's innocent question. Why do you always talk different about Ryan when he's not here? How long had this been going on? How many conversations had they been having about my life, about my relationship, about my future, without me there to hear them? And what else had they said that 14-year-old Caleb had been absorbing? I'd been so focused on trying to bridge the gap between my family and Ryan that I'd missed the fact that there was no gap to bridge. There was just a wall they'd been building, one pointed comment at a time. And I'd been helping them build it by making excuses for them, by smoothing things over, by telling Ryan they just needed time to warm up to him. I'd been so desperate for everyone to get along that I'd ignored the evidence right in front of me. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? I met Ryan Ryan at a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning in March, which sounds like the beginning of every romantic comedy ever made, except this one came with a family that believed love should come with a credit score and a retirement plan. He was sitting at the table next to mine, frantically editing photos on his laptop while simultaneously trying to answer client emails on his phone. When his coffee mug tipped over and sent liquid cascading toward his equipment, I grabbed a stack of napkins without thinking. "You just saved my entire business," he said, dabbing frantically at his keyboard. "That's a lot of pressure for some coffee shop napkins," I replied, and he laughed. Really laughed, not the polite chuckle you give strangers. 3 hours later, we were still talking. He showed me his portfolio, wedding photos that somehow captured not just the big moments, but the tiny ones. A grandmother adjusting a bride's veil, a flower girl sneaking cake frosting, a father wiping away tears he thought nobody saw. His work had this quality that made you feel like you were discovering something secret and beautiful. "I want to tell stories," he explained. "Not just take pictures, but show people who they really are in their best moments." I was supposed to meet my parents for lunch that day. I texted them that something came up at work. By our third date, I knew I was in trouble. Ryan had this way of listening that made you feel like everything you said mattered. When I told him about my marketing job, he didn't just nod politely. He asked about the campaigns I was proudest of, what made me choose that field, whether I'd ever thought about starting my own agency someday. Nobody had ever asked me what I wanted to do someday. They asked about my benefits package, my promotion timeline, my 401k matching. Ryan was the first person who seemed genuinely curious about my dreams instead of my stability. I should have known my parents would have opinions. The first time I brought him home was for my mom's birthday dinner in May. I'd been nervous for days, coaching Ryan on safe conversation topics and warning him that my dad would probably ask about his business plan. "They just want to make sure I'm good enough for you," Ryan had said, straightening his tie in my hallway mirror. "I get it. I'd probably do the same thing if I had a daughter." Sweet, naive Ryan. He thought this was going to be a normal meet the parents situation where they'd grill him a little and then gradually warm up to him. He had no idea he was walking into an evaluation committee that had already decided he wasn't going to pass. The dinner started fine. Mom complimented his shirt, Dad asked about his family, his college experience, his plans for the future, standard parental interrogation stuff. But then the questions got more pointed. What kind of health insurance did freelancers usually carry? Had he thought about what he'd do if the photography market became oversaturated? Was he planning to expand into more commercially viable areas of the field? Ryan answered everything patiently, professionally. He explained that he was building a client base, that he was investing in better equipment, that he was networking with other vendors in the wedding industry. He showed them testimonials from satisfied clients on his phone. My parents nodded and smiled and said all the right things, but I could see it in their eyes, the way they exchanged glances when he mentioned turning down a corporate photography job because it didn't align with his artistic vision. The pause before my dad said, "Well, that's certainly principled of you." After Ryan left, they didn't say anything directly negative. They didn't have to. "He seems very passionate," Mom said, which somehow sounded like a criticism. "Passionate people can be unpredictable," Dad added, "especially when it comes to making practical decisions." "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked. "Nothing, honey. We just want you to be careful. You have such a good head on your shoulders usually." Usually, as if dating Ryan was evidence that I'd temporarily lost my mind. The comments started small after that. Little observations dropped into casual conversation like tiny bombs designed to explode later when I was alone with my thoughts. "How's Ryan's business going? Still doing those weekend weddings?" Mom would ask, making weekend weddings sound like a child's lemonade stand. "I saw an article about how oversaturated the photography market is these days," Dad would mention during completely unrelated conversations. "So many people think they can make a living with a camera." They never said Ryan's name when they made these observations. They never connected them directly to my relationship, but the message was clear. Your boyfriend's career is unstable, impractical, and probably doomed to fail. I started defending him without even realizing it. When they'd make their subtle digs, I'd jump in with success stories. The hotel chain contact, the referral from a previous client, the photography workshop he was teaching at the community center. "That's wonderful, dear," Mom would say in that tone that meant she was humoring me. "I'm sure he's working very hard." The worst part was that I could see it affecting Ryan, even though he never said anything. He'd get quiet during family gatherings, speaking only when directly asked a question. The easy confidence he had everywhere else seemed to shrink in my parents' presence. "They don't like me much, do they?" he asked one night after a particularly brutal Sunday dinner, where Dad had spent 20 minutes explaining how important it was to have realistic career expectations in today's economy. "They just need time to get to know you," I said, which was what I always said. "They're protective. They want to make sure I'm with someone who can provide stability, and they don't think I can do that." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, but we both knew he wasn't. The thing is, I'd grown up hearing about stability my whole life. My parents had built their marriage on practical foundations. Dad's steady job in insurance, Mom's part-time work as a bookkeeper, their careful budgeting and planning and saving. They'd given me and Caleb a secure childhood, a college education without debt, a safety net that let us take reasonable risks. But somewhere along the way, reasonable risks had become no risks at all. They'd convinced me to switch from veterinary medicine to marketing because it was more stable. They'd steered me toward my current job because it had better long-term prospects than the smaller agency I'd really wanted to work for. I'd trusted their judgment because they were my parents, and they'd never steered me wrong before. But now I was starting to wonder if their version of never steering me wrong actually meant never letting me steer myself. Ryan represented something they couldn't control or predict. He was following his passion instead of a safe career path. He was building something creative instead of climbing someone else's corporate ladder. He was everything they'd trained me not to want. But I did want him. I wanted his laugh and his curiosity and the way he saw beauty in ordinary moments. I wanted the future he talked about, traveling to photograph destination weddings, maybe opening a studio someday, creating art that mattered to people. I wanted a life that wasn't entirely planned out in spreadsheets and retirement calculators. The problem was, every time I started to imagine that life clearly, I could hear my parents' voices in the back of my mind, asking the practical questions. What about health insurance? What about saving for a house? What about having kids someday? Ryan and I had been together for 8 months, and I still hadn't figured out how to silence those voices long enough to listen to my own. The campaign to destroy my relationship shifted into high gear sometime in September, though it took me weeks to realize what was was happening. It started with my mom's sudden interest in my coworker Brandon. She'd never shown any curiosity about my job before, but now she wanted to know everything about this guy I'd mentioned exactly twice in passing. "He sounds so accomplished," she said during one of our weekly phone calls. "And he went to business school? That's impressive. Is he single?" "Mom, I'm just asking. You spend so much time at work together. It's natural to wonder if there might be workplace friendships developing." Workplace friendships, right? The next week, she started sending me articles. Not directly. She'd forward them to our family group chat with innocent little messages like, "Thought this was interesting," or "Saw this and thought of our conversation the other day." The articles were always about the same thing: the gig economy, freelance work, the importance of financial planning for couples. One particularly brutal piece was titled, "When Love Isn't Enough: Red Flags in Financially Incompatible Relationships." "Did you see Mom's article about financial compatibility?" Dad would ask during our Sunday phone calls. "Some good points in there. Have you and Ryan talked about long-term planning yet?" I started dreading these conversations. Every call became a minefield of loaded questions and helpful suggestions that felt more like warnings. Meanwhile, my parents' attitude toward Ryan during family gatherings went from cool politeness to something approaching hostility disguised as concern. "How's the photography business?" Dad would ask, emphasizing the word business like it was a joke. "Still mostly weekends?" "Actually, I've been booking some corporate events during the week," Ryan would answer. "Conference photography, headshots, that kind of thing." "Oh, that's good," Mom would say. Diversification is so important in uncertain fields. Uncertain fields? Every conversation came loaded with these little verbal landmines. The worst part was watching Ryan's confidence erode bit by bit. He started second-guessing himself in ways I'd never seen before. One night in October, he spent an hour researching business insurance plans after my dad had made some offhand comment about what happens when you get sued in creative industries. "Maybe I should look into getting a part-time job somewhere," Ryan said one evening, staring at his laptop screen. "Just for stability." "Your dad mentioned that his company might be hiring for their marketing department." "You don't want to work at an insurance company," I said. "I don't want a lot of things, but maybe what I want isn't the most important thing here." The defeat in his voice made something snap inside me. My parents weren't just questioning his career. They were systematically dismantling his sense of self-worth. I decided to confront them. "We need to talk," I said to my mom during one of our phone calls. "About Ryan." "What about him, honey? You're not being fair to him. All these questions about his business, the articles you keep sending, the comments about stability. It's not subtle, Mom. You're trying to break us up." There was a long pause. "Olivia, that's not what we're doing at all. We're just concerned about your future." "Is that so wrong?" "You're not concerned. You're interfering." "We're your parents. We love you. We want to make sure you're making good decisions." "And you don't think Ryan is a good decision?" Another pause. "We think Ryan is a lovely person. We just wonder if he's the right person for you long-term." "Based on what?" "Based on the fact that you've always been so practical, so goal-oriented. You've never been the type to chase fantasies." "His career isn't a fantasy. He's building a business." "Honey, we know you believe in him, but belief doesn't pay bills. Belief doesn't buy houses or provide health insurance or save for retirement." "Did you have this conversation with Dad when you married him? Did Grandma and Grandpa interrogate him about his 5-year plan?" "That was different. Your father had a stable job." "That was different because you loved each other and figured the rest out as you went." "Why can't I have the same chance?" "Because the world is more competitive now, more expensive. You can't just wing it anymore." But I could hear it in her voice, the subtle shift that told me this wasn't really about money or practical concerns. This was about control, about their vision of what my life should look like. The conversation ended badly, with both of us frustrated and nothing resolved. Things got worse after that. My parents stopped pretending to be supportive of Ryan entirely. The passive-aggressive comments became openly skeptical questions. Family dinners turned into interrogations where Ryan was expected to justify every business decision he'd ever made. "So this hotel client," Dad said during one particularly brutal October dinner, "how much are they paying you for this promotional work?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "I'd rather not discuss specific numbers." "Because it's not very much, is it?" "Dad," I warned, "I'm just trying to understand the business model here. If you're not making enough on individual projects to build savings, how do you plan to scale up?" "I'm reinvesting in equipment and marketing," Ryan said. "Building a client base takes time." "How much time? You've been doing this for how long now?" 2 years full-time? "And you're still building." The word hung in the air like an accusation. I started lying to avoid these situations. I'd tell Ryan my parents were busy when they invited us over. I'd make excuses about work events or other commitments, anything to avoid watching them slowly tear him apart. But lying meant I was at family gatherings alone, which gave them free rein to really express their opinions. "We're worried about you," Mom said during one November dinner after I'd made another excuse for Ryan's absence. "You've been different since you started dating him." "Different how?" "More defensive, more secretive. You used to tell us everything." "Maybe because every time I mention him you find something to criticize." "We're not criticizing him," Dad interjected. "We're asking practical questions. Questions you should be asking yourself." "Like what?" "Like whether you're willing to sacrifice your financial security for someone else's dream. Like whether you want to spend your 30s worrying about making rent while your friends are buying houses and starting families." "Ryan and I haven't even talked about moving in together yet." "Exactly. After 8 months you should be having those conversations. But you can't, can you? Because deep down, you know the numbers don't add up." I wanted to argue, but the terrible thing was that part of me wondered if they were right. Ryan and I hadn't talked about moving in together, about combining finances, about what our future would actually look like day to day. I'd been so busy defending our relationship that I'd never stopped to examine it honestly. That doubt was exactly what they'd been trying to plant. The breaking point came in early December at Caleb's winter concert. Ryan had been looking forward to it for weeks. He'd offered to take photos of the performance for free, just because he knew how much it meant to our family. We arrived at the school auditorium together, Ryan carrying his camera bag and looking genuinely excited to be there. But the moment my parents saw us, their faces fell. "Oh," Mom said, "Ryan's here." Not "Hi, Ryan," or "Nice to see you." Just a statement of fact, like she was noting an unexpected weather condition. "He offered to photograph the concert," I explained, "as a gift." "That's thoughtful," Dad said, though his tone suggested it was anything but. "I hope the lighting will be adequate for amateur equipment." "Amateur equipment." Ryan's camera setup was worth more than my car. "Actually, I do a lot of low-light photography," Ryan said quietly. "School concerts, evening events. I brought some additional lighting gear. I'm sure you did your best, Mom interrupted. We already hired the school's official photographer, though. Wouldn't want to interfere with their job. They hadn't hired anyone. I knew because I'd asked Caleb about it the week before, and he'd said the school never photographed winter concerts. Ryan's face went carefully blank. Of course, I understand. But he didn't understand, and neither did I. This wasn't about photography or lighting or professional courtesy. This was about putting him in his place. We sat through Caleb's concert in tense silence, Ryan's camera bag sitting unused at his feet like evidence of his unworthiness. Afterward, at the reception in the school cafeteria, my parents introduced me to everyone we encountered, but they never introduced Ryan. He'd stand there beside me, smiling politely, while they talked to neighbors and other parents as if he was invisible. "This is our daughter Olivia," they'd say. "She works in marketing at Hartwell & Associates, doing so well for herself." Ryan would extend his hand to shake, and they'd acknowledge him with the bare minimum of politeness before turning back to me. By the time we got to my car, Ryan was done pretending everything was fine. "They hate me," he said quietly. "They don't hate you." "Yes, they do. And honestly, I'm starting to understand why you've been making excuses to keep me away from your family. This is exhausting, Olivia. I feel like I'm on trial every time I'm around them, and I never know what I'm being accused of." I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't, because he was right. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "They're my parents, and I'm supposed to be your partner. But lately, it feels like you're more concerned with managing their feelings than protecting mine." That hit like a punch to the stomach because it was absolutely true. "I'm trying to keep everyone happy. You can't. And the fact that you're trying means you've already chosen a side." He wasn't being dramatic or unfair. He was pointing out the reality I'd been refusing to see. By constantly trying to smooth things over, by making excuses for my parents' behavior, by lying to avoid conflict, I'd been enabling their campaign against him. I'd been complicit in my own relationship's destruction. The realization terrified me, but not as much as what Ryan said next. "I think we need some space to figure this out. I can't keep being your family's target practice while you try to find a middle ground that doesn't exist." He didn't break up with me that night, but he might as well have. The message was clear. Choose your family's approval or choose me, but you can't have both. And I had no idea which choice I was capable of making. Ryan and I barely spoke for 3 days after the concert disaster. He wasn't giving me the silent treatment. He was giving me space to figure out what I wanted. The problem was, I'd been so focused on managing everyone else's feelings that I'd forgotten how to identify my own. On Thursday evening, I drove to my parents' house with no real plan except to have it out with them once and for all. I'd rehearsed the conversation in my head during the entire 20-minute drive, but all my carefully prepared arguments evaporated the moment I walked through their front door and saw Caleb sprawled on the living room floor with his tablet, headphones on, completely absorbed in whatever he was watching. Normal family life, peaceful, uncomplicated. "Olivia," Mom called from the kitchen. "What a nice surprise. I was just making tea. Want some?" This was how it always went. The moment I showed up to confront them about their behavior, they'd slip back into their loving parent roles so seamlessly that I'd start questioning whether I'd imagined the whole thing. "We need to talk," I said, following her into the kitchen. "Of course, honey, what's on your mind?" Dad appeared in the doorway, still in his work clothes, looking genuinely pleased to see me. "Hey, kiddo, everything okay?" And there it was, the fundamental problem with confronting them. They weren't cartoon villains. They were my parents, who loved me and wanted what they thought was best for me, which made it almost impossible to call them out for being manipulative and cruel. "It's about Ryan," I said, "and how you've been treating him." The temperature in the room dropped by about 10 degrees. "What about Ryan?" Mom asked carefully. "You know what? The comments, the questions, the way you ignored him at Caleb's concert. You're trying to break us up." "Olivia," Dad started. "Don't. Please don't pretend this isn't happening. I'm not stupid, and I'm not imagining it. You've been systematically undermining my relationship for months." Mom set down her teacup. "We've been asking practical questions about your future. That's what parents do." "No, you've been planting doubts and making him feel unwelcome. There's a difference. If asking about someone's career plans makes them feel unwelcome, maybe that says something about their confidence in their own choices," Dad said. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Even now, confronted directly, they couldn't admit what they were doing. "He's building a business," I said. "It takes time." "How much time?" Mom asked. "At what point do you stop calling it building and start calling it struggling? You don't even know him. You've never tried to get to know him." "We know enough," Dad said. "We know he can't support a family. We know he doesn't have health insurance or a retirement plan or any kind of financial safety net. We know you're too polite to ask him the hard questions, so we have to. Those aren't your questions to ask. They are if you're our daughter and we love you," Mom said. "Olivia, you've always been so sensible about everything else. Why is this different?" "Because it's my life," I wanted to scream. "Because I'm in love with him. Because for the first time in my adult life, I want something that doesn't fit into your spreadsheets and 5-year plans." But I couldn't say any of that, because somewhere deep down, I was still the little girl who wanted her parents' approval more than anything else in the world. "I think I should go," I said. "Don't leave angry," Mom pleaded. "We're having this conversation because we care about you." "No, you're having this conversation because you can't control me anymore, and it terrifies you." I walked out before they could respond, but their voices followed me to the front door. The same reasonable, concerned tones they'd been using to dismantle my relationship for months. I was halfway to my car when Caleb caught up with me. "Olivia, wait!" I turned around. My 14-year-old brother was standing in the driveway in his socks, holding his tablet. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I heard you guys arguing." "I'm fine, Caleb, just some grown-up stuff." "Is it about Ryan?" The question surprised me. "Why would you think that?" Caleb glanced back at the house, then stepped closer. "Because they're always talking about Ryan when you're not here." "What do you mean?" "Like after you leave from dinner or whatever, they'll start talking about him. Mom will say stuff like, 'I hope Olivia realizes this or that,' and Dad will go on about how you're not thinking clearly." My stomach clenched. "What kind of stuff?" Caleb looked uncomfortable. "I don't know. Just mean stuff. Like they'll analyze everything he said during dinner and find problems with with it. Mom will be like, did you hear how he said he was thinking about expanding into corporate work? That means he's not making enough money with weddings. And Dad will be like, she's going to regret this when she's 30 and wants to buy a house. Each word hit like a physical blow. I'd suspected they were talking about Ryan behind my back, but hearing it confirmed was devastating. When did this start? I asked. Pretty much right after you brought him to Mom's birthday dinner. At first it was just little comments, but lately, he trailed off. Lately what? Lately, it's like they have a whole plan. Mom's been looking up information about that guy Brandon from your work. She even looked at his social media profiles. What? Yeah, she was showing Dad his LinkedIn page and talking about how he went to business school and makes good money. She said maybe she should invite him to dinner sometime, like as a friend of the family. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. The sudden interest in Brandon. The questions about whether we spent time together outside of work. The casual mentions of how accomplished and stable he was. They weren't just trying to break me up with Ryan. They were already shopping for his replacement. Caleb? I said carefully. Do you remember specific things they said? He nodded. Want me to tell you? Actually, I said, an idea forming. Did any of these conversations happen recently? Like in the last week or two? Yeah, tons of them. Especially after the concert thing. Mom was really upset about how you reacted. Do you ever record stuff on your tablet, like for school projects or whatever? Caleb's face went red. Sometimes, but not on purpose. Sometimes I leave it recording by accident when I'm doing homework in the kitchen, and then I forget to delete the files. By accident? Okay, not totally by accident, he admitted. Sometimes when they start talking about private stuff, I get curious, but I don't mean to spy on them. Caleb, this is important. Do you have recordings of them talking about Ryan? He looked down at his tablet. Maybe. Can I hear them? I don't know, it feels like tattling. It's not tattling if they're saying things about me that affect my life. These are conversations about me, right? Don't I have a right to know what people are saying about me behind my back? Caleb considered this. I guess. But you can't tell them I recorded anything. They'll take my tablet away forever. I won't tell them how I found out. He looked back at the house one more time, then unlocked his tablet. Okay, but some of this stuff is really mean. Like meaner than they've ever been about anyone. He scrolled through his files and found one from 3 days ago, the day after the concert. This one's pretty bad, he said, handing me the tablet with earbuds attached. I put in the earbuds and pressed play. My parents' voices filled my ears, clear as if I was sitting right there with them. Don't understand what she sees in him, Mom was saying. He's nice enough, but he's so unrealistic. She's always been attracted to creative types, Dad replied. Remember that musician she dated in college? At least this one doesn't have tattoos. It's not about tattoos, Robert. It's about the fact that she's 26 years old and wasting her time with someone who's never going to be able to provide for her. Maybe we should be more direct. Stop hinting around and just tell her what we think. No, that'll just make her defensive. She's already getting snippy when we ask basic questions about his finances. If we push too hard, she'll dig in deeper. There was a pause. Then Mom's voice again, colder than I'd ever heard it. I looked up that Brandon from her work. He's perfect for her. Good job, stable income, owns his own condo, and he's single. Are you seriously thinking about matchmaking? I'm thinking about our daughter's future. She could do so much better than a wannabe photographer who lives in a studio apartment and drives a 10-year-old Honda. The Honda's not that old. Robert, this isn't a joke. She's going to wake up one day and realize she wasted her 20s on someone who can't give her the life she deserves. By then, it might be too late. So what do you want to do? I want to keep asking the hard questions. Make her see that this relationship doesn't have a real future. And maybe create some opportunities for her to spend time with people who would be better matches. Like Brandon. I was thinking we could invite him to our Christmas party, as a friend of the family. Let Olivia see what she's missing. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, dissecting every aspect of my relationship with clinical precision. They analyzed Ryan's body language, questioned his family background, speculated about his finances, and strategized about how to help me see reason without triggering my stubborn streak. By the time it ended, I was sitting on my parents' front porch steps, staring at Caleb's tablet in complete shock. There are more, Caleb said quietly, from different days. They're all kind of like that. How many more? Maybe 10? 12? I don't record every time they talk about it, just when I'm doing homework in the kitchen and they think I can't hear them. 10 or 12 recordings, months of conversations plotting the destruction of my relationship. Caleb, can you send these to me? All of them? All of them. He looked nervous. What are you going to do? I'm going to make sure Ryan knows that none of this is his fault. And then I'm going to have a very different conversation with Mom and Dad. As Caleb transferred the files to my phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Absolute clarity about what I needed to do next. My parents had been waging a secret war against my relationship, using my love and trust as weapons against me. They'd made me doubt myself, doubt Ryan, and doubt whether love was enough to build a life on. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated Caleb's curiosity and his tablet's recording capabilities. Now I had proof. Not suspicions or hurt feelings or paranoid interpretations of innocent comments. I had their actual voices in their own words, plotting to destroy the best thing that had ever happened to me. The question now wasn't whether I should confront them. The question was whether they were prepared for the conversation they'd actually been having all along. I spent Friday morning listening to all 12 recordings while sitting in my car in the parking lot at work. By the time I'd heard every cruel analysis, every calculated strategy, every dismissive comment about the man I loved, I felt completely hollowed out. But I also felt something else. Rage. Pure, clean, justified rage. That evening I called Ryan. Can you come over tonight? I asked. There's something I need to show you. And then I need you to come with me to my parents' house tomorrow. Olivia, I told you I needed space. I know. And after tomorrow, you can have all the space you need. But first, you need to hear something. There was a long pause. What kind of something? Proof that none of this has been your fault. When Ryan arrived at my apartment an hour later, I had my laptop set up on the kitchen table with the audio files queued up. Before I play these, I said, I want you to know that I'm sorry. I've been so focused on trying to keep everyone happy that I forgot my job was supposed to be protecting you, not managing their feelings. Olivia, what are you talking about? I pressed play on the first recording. Ryan's face went through several stages as he listened. Confusion, recognition, hurt, and finally, a kind of grim vindication. Jesus, he said when the first clip ended. How long has this been going on? Months, since your first family dinner. I played him 3 more recordings, the worst ones, where they discussed their strategy most explicitly. By the time we finished, Ryan was staring at the laptop screen like it had personally betrayed him. They've been planning this whole thing, he said quietly. quietly. The questions, the articles, the way they treated me at the concert, it wasn't just disapproval. It was a campaign. I'm so sorry. You didn't know. I should have. I should have trusted my instincts instead of making excuses for them. Ryan was quiet for a long time, then he said, "What do you want to do?" "I want to confront them. Tomorrow. I want you there when I play these recordings so they can't pretend this was all in my head or that they were just looking out for my best interests. I want them to have to look you in the eye and explain themselves." "Are you sure? This is going to blow up your family." "My family blew itself up the moment they decided to sabotage my relationship behind my back. I'm just going to make sure everyone knows it." Saturday afternoon, we drove to my parents' house together. Ryan was quiet during the drive, but not the defeated quiet from before. This was something different. Focused, determined. "Are you nervous?" I asked as we pulled into their driveway. "Weirdly, no. I've been dreading facing your parents for months. But now that I know what they actually think of me, there's nothing left to be nervous about. The worst has already happened." We found my parents in the living room, reading the weekend paper. Caleb was upstairs. I'd texted him earlier to make sure he'd be out of the way. "Olivia," Mom said, looking genuinely pleased. "And Ryan? What a nice surprise." "We need to talk," I said. "All of us. Together." Something in my tone must have warned them, because Dad folded his newspaper, and Mom's smile became more cautious. "Of course," Dad said. "What's on your mind?" I set my laptop on their coffee table and opened it. "I want to play something for you." "What kind of something?" Mom asked. "A conversation you had 3 days ago about my relationship." The color drained from both their faces. "Olivia, I don't know what you think you heard." "I didn't hear anything, but Caleb did." I pressed play on the first recording. The sound of my parents' voices filled their living room, discussing Ryan like he was a problem to be solved rather than a person they'd met. "Don't understand what she sees in him. He's nice enough, but he's so unrealistic." "She's always been attracted to creative types. Remember that musician she dated in college? At least this one doesn't have tattoos." Mom reached for the laptop. "Turn that off." "No." I moved the laptop away from her. "You're going to listen to all of it." The recording continued, laying out their strategy for breaking us up, their research into Brandon, their clinical analysis of Ryan's shortcomings. My parents sat in stunned silence, listening to their own voices plot against their daughter's happiness. When it ended, nobody spoke for a long moment. "How many of these do you have?" Dad asked finally. 12. "Caleb recorded us?" "Accidentally," he says. "But honestly, I don't care how I got them. What I care about is that you've been lying to me for months." "We weren't lying," Mom said weakly. "We were concerned." "Concerned parents don't research their daughter's coworkers as replacement boyfriends," I said. "Concerned parents don't strategize about how to manipulate their child without triggering her stubborn streak." I played another clip, the one where they discussed inviting Brandon to their Christmas party. "You were going to ambush me," I said. "Invite some guy from my work to a family party, and what? Hope I'd suddenly realize what I was missing?" "Brandon is a lovely person," Mom said defensively. "Stable, educated. I don't care if Brandon is a saint. I'm not dating Brandon. I'm dating Ryan. And instead of getting to know Ryan or trusting my judgment or respecting my choices, you decided to wage a secret war against my relationship." Ryan, who had been silent through all of this, finally spoke. "Mrs. Brennan, can I ask you something?" Mom looked at him warily. "I suppose." "In all these recordings, in all these conversations about my career and my finances and my future prospects, did you ever once consider asking me directly about any of these concerns?" We didn't want to put you on the spot." "You didn't want to put me on the spot, but you were comfortable speculating about my health insurance status with your husband? You were comfortable analyzing my body language and questioning my family background, but you couldn't ask me about my business plan?" "It wasn't personal," Dad said. "It was entirely personal. You decided I wasn't good enough for your daughter, and instead of giving me a chance to prove otherwise, you set out to convince her you were right." "We were protecting her," Mom said. "From what? From being with someone who makes her happy? From making a mistake she'll regret," Dad said. "From giving up her security for someone who can't provide stability." "What makes you think I can't provide stability?" "Your career. My career that you know nothing about because you never asked me about it. My finances that you've never seen. My plans that you've never let me explain." Ryan's voice was getting sharper, and I could see my parents starting to realize how indefensible their position was. "You want to know about my finances?" Ryan continued. "I made more money last year than Olivia did. I have better health insurance than she does. I own my studio apartment, didn't rent it, bought it, and I have a retirement account that I contribute to every month." My parents stared at him. "But you didn't ask me about any of that because you'd already decided who I was based on the fact that I don't work in an office. You took one look at me and saw someone who wasn't worthy of your daughter, and then you spent 8 months trying to prove yourselves right instead of letting yourselves be wrong. We just want what's best for Olivia," Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction now. "No, you want what's familiar. What feels safe to you. You want her to marry someone who reminds you of yourselves, regardless of whether that person makes her happy." I played one more recording, the one where they talked about me wasting my 20s on someone who couldn't give me the life I deserved. "This is what you really think," I said. "That I'm too stupid to know what's good for me. That I need you to manage my life because I can't be trusted to make my own decisions." "That's not true," Dad protested. "Then why didn't you trust me? Why didn't you trust that if Ryan was wrong for me, I'd figure it out on my own?" "Because you changed your major for that musician in college," Mom said. "Because you've always been impulsive when it comes to relationships." I was 19 years old, and even if I had been impulsive, that doesn't give you the right to sabotage my relationship as an adult. We weren't sabotaging anything. We were just, you were matchmaking behind my back. You were planting doubts about my boyfriend's character and career. You were making him feel unwelcome in his girlfriend's family. What do you call that if not sabotage?" For the first time, my parents had no answer. The silence stretched on until Ryan spoke again. "I want to ask you both something, and I want an honest answer. If I had walked in here 8 months ago and told you I was a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, would we be having this conversation right now?" "That's not the point," Dad said. "It's exactly the point. You judged me based on my job title, not my character. You decided I was unreliable because I'm an artist, not because I'd ever done anything unreliable." "Art isn't a stable career," Mom said. "Neither is insurance," Ryan shot back. "Companies downsize, industries change, people get laid off. The only difference is that when my income varies, it's because I'm building something for myself instead of hoping someone else's business stays profitable enough to keep employing me." My parents looked stunned. They'd never considered that their definition of stability might be an illusion. "The truth is," Ryan continued, "you were never worried about Olivia's financial security. You were worried about losing control over her life, and when you realized you couldn't control me or intimidate me or shape me into what you wanted, you decided to get rid of me instead. He was right, and we all knew it. I think, I said quietly, you owe both of us an apology. A real one. Not an apology for caring too much or wanting the best for me. An apology for lying, for manipulating, and for treating the person I love like he was disposable. My parents looked at each other, then back at us. For a moment, I thought they might double down, might insist they'd done nothing wrong. But then Dad's shoulders sagged and he said, "You're right, we're sorry." "I'm sorry too," Mom added, her voice barely above a whisper. We handled this badly. It wasn't the full acknowledgement I wanted, but it was a start. The question now, I said, is what happens next? What happened next wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation where everyone hugged and pretended the last 8 months hadn't happened. Real relationships don't heal that quickly, and real trust doesn't rebuild overnight. But it was a beginning. My parents and I agreed to take a break from each other for 2 weeks while everyone processed what had been revealed. During that time, Ryan and I had the long conversations we should have been having all along about our future, our finances, our dreams, and how we wanted to build a life together. "I need to know this won't happen again," Ryan said one evening as we sat in his studio apartment, looking through his portfolio. "Not just with your parents, but with anyone. I need to know that you'll have my back when people question us." "You'll have my back," I promised. I should have had it from the beginning. "And I need to know that you actually want this life we're talking about, not because you're rebelling against your parents, but because you genuinely choose it." That was the harder question to answer because he was right to ask it. For months, I'd been so focused on defending our relationship that I'd never stopped to examine what I actually wanted from it. But sitting there in his apartment, surrounded by the photographs that told other people's love stories, I knew with absolute certainty that I wanted him to tell ours too. When the 2 weeks were up, my parents called and asked if we could all have dinner together. Not at their house this time. Neutral territory, at a restaurant downtown. "We've been thinking about what you said," Mom began carefully. "About control, and about not trusting your judgment. We realized we never gave Ryan a fair chance," Dad added. "We made assumptions based on, well, on our own fears about what we thought you needed. We'd like to start over," Mom said, looking directly at Ryan. "If you're willing." Ryan considered this. "What does starting over look like?" "It looks like us getting to know you as a person instead of as a career profile," Dad said. "It looks like asking you about your business because we're genuinely interested, not because we're looking for flaws. And it looks like trusting Olivia's judgment about her own life," Mom added quietly. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, still conversations that felt forced, still times when I could see my parents biting back their old instincts to manage and control. But slowly things began to change. Dad started asking Ryan about his photography techniques instead of his profit margins. Mom began sharing his social media posts instead of sending me articles about the gig economy. When Ryan mentioned wanting to expand into commercial real estate photography, they asked thoughtful questions about his business plan instead of immediately pointing out the risks. The real breakthrough came 3 months later, when Ryan photographed my cousin's wedding. My parents saw him work for the first time, saw how he connected with people, how he captured moments that professional wedding photographers often missed, how much joy he brought to one of the most important days in someone's life. "I understand now," Mom said to me afterward. "It's not just a job for him, it's who he is." "It always was," I replied. "You just had to be willing to see it." The most unexpected change was in Caleb, who had been quietly carrying guilt about the recordings for months. He finally confessed to our parents what he'd done, expecting to be in serious trouble. Instead, Dad sat him down for a long conversation about privacy, trust, and the difference between accidentally overhearing something and deliberately recording it. "I'm not mad that you recorded us," Dad told him. "I'm embarrassed that we gave you something worth recording. We should never have been talking about your sister and Ryan that way in the first place." "So I'm not grounded forever?" Caleb asked. "You're grounded for 2 weeks for the recording thing," Mom said. "But you probably saved your sister's relationship, so we're calling it even." By summer, things had settled into a new normal. Family dinners were no longer minefields of loaded questions and passive-aggressive comments. My parents asked Ryan about his work because they were interested, not because they were gathering ammunition. They included him in family planning conversations and stopped treating our relationship like a phase I'd eventually outgrow. The real test came when Ryan and I decided to move in together in August. I braced myself for another round of concerned conversations about financial compatibility and long-term planning. Instead, my parents asked if we needed help moving furniture. "You're happy," Mom observed one afternoon when she came over to see our new apartment. "Happier than I've seen you in years." "I am happy." "Then we're happy too." It sounds simple when I write it like that, but it represented a fundamental shift in how they saw their role in my life. They'd moved from trying to control my choices to supporting the choices I made. That doesn't mean everything became perfect. There are still moments when I catch them exchanging looks, still times when I can tell they're holding back opinions they think I don't want to hear. But now, when that happens, we talk about it directly instead of letting it fester into months of manipulation and resentment. Ryan and I got engaged 6 months later. When we announced it at Sunday dinner, my parents' congratulations felt genuine for the first time in our relationship. "Have you thought about having Ryan photograph the engagement party?" Mom suggested. "I saw his latest wedding photos online. They're beautiful." "Actually," Ryan said, grinning, "I was hoping to hire someone else for that. I'd rather be in the pictures than behind the camera." "Smart man," Dad said, raising his glass, "to Ryan and Olivia, and to figuring things out as you go." As I looked around the table, at my parents, who had learned to trust my judgment, at Caleb, who had accidentally saved my relationship with his curiosity and his tablet, at Ryan, who had found his place in our chaotic family, I realized something important. Love isn't enough to build a relationship on, but it's essential. Trust isn't something you earn once and keep forever. It's something you choose to give and re-give every day. And family isn't just about blood relations or shared history. It's about the people who choose to show up for your happiness, even when they don't understand it. My parents had spent months trying to protect me from what they saw as a mistake. What they learned, what we all learned, is that the biggest mistake would have been not letting me make my own choices and live with the consequences. Sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who have the hardest time letting you be yourself. But if you're lucky, and if you're willing to have the hard conversations, they can learn to love who you actually are instead of who they think you should be. 2 years later, Ryan and I are planning our wedding. My parents are helping with the guest list, and they've insisted on paying for the flowers as their gift to us. Caleb is going to be be Ryan's best man, partly because they've become genuinely close, and partly because we all agree he deserves the honor after inadvertently saving our relationship. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Caleb hadn't been curious enough to accidentally record those conversations. Would Ryan and I have eventually broken up under the constant pressure? Would I have convinced myself that my parents were right, that love wasn't enough? I don't know, but I'm grateful I didn't have to find out. The wedding is going to be photographed by one of Ryan's colleagues, a talented artist who captures the kinds of moments that matter. Ryan will be in front of the camera for once, dancing with his new wife, surrounded by family who finally sees him for who he really is. And somewhere in those photos, if you know what to look for, you'll see the evidence of something rare and precious, a family that learned how to love each other better.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop your favorite part in the comments. See you in the next one.